Has anyone ever asked you what you want to be when you grow up? Or what you'll major in college? Or will your work once you graduate? If those questions sound familiar, and maybe you said astronaut or superhero, stay tuned.
Hey friends, it's Heather.
It's Hope.
And it's Heidi. And this is the Finding Our Way Through podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing our own career paths. They haven't been astronaut or superhero, but
Wah.
yeah, stay tuned to listen to how we navigated them. And as we talk about it, we hope to offer several helpful tidbits we've learned along the way. As we share, we hope that what we communicate will be helpful to anyone in our listening community attempting to navigate their own career paths as well. And so we decided to do this podcast on career paths because one of our listeners asked us what each of us does for a living. And so instead of answering that question before we did a podcast on another topic, we thought this would be a good one for the podcast, of course, because most everyone can relate to having a job and or building a career, whether the job's in the home or out of the home. You guys relate to that?
We sure do.
Do you guys live to work or do you work to make a living? That's the
Good
question.
question.
Good question. It is. So please note this podcast and the opinions, ideas, and views expressed here are solely the podcast authors or individuals participating in the podcast, and they don't represent the opinions of any of our employers, past or present. Having just said that disclaimer, Heath and Hope, I know over the years we've had countless discussions about our work lives.
Countless is such a good word to say to describe that, Heidi.
And we're still having countless discussions today.
Countless.
And
Yes.
and I think the countless ones, I think you guys have probably had more than I've had with you both because you're in similar industries.
Oh boy, have we, Heather.
Oh boy, have we ever.
Well, to provide some context for our audience, maybe we can start by having you guys say a few words about what you studied in college and how that may or may not have translated into what you ended up doing for your first job. So I don't know, Hope, would you like to start?
Sure, Hyde. I would love to start. So as you both know, I graduated from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst with a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. I did not go to school thinking that I would study economics. I went to college not really knowing what I was going to study and was a liberal arts major. And I sort of gravitated to economics because it came easy. For those of you in our listening community, economics is simply the study of the economy. But I did want to check my definition, so I did look at Investopedia, which had a much more involved definition. Which I'm gonna say it to the two of you, okay?
Okay, I'm ready for it.
Investopedia says economics is a social science concerned chiefly with description and analysis of the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. So in my laywoman's term, again, the study of the economy and how it works.
I hope if anybody was looking that up on Investopedia, they need another dictionary to understand those terms.
I know, it's so funny.
So funny.
So I studied economics, and what I studied in economics on the surface didn't really translate or relate to my first job out of college. I think coming out of school, again, as you both know, I spent some time in Japan, and when I came back to the States, I ended up moving to the West Coast. And you might or might not remember this, but because I had spent time in Japan, I was actually thinking about getting into the import-export field. Do either of you remember me ever talking about that? It was a long time ago, so maybe not.
I can't remember, 2 days ago, let alone what you were doing. How long ago was that?
It has to be, gosh, 25. How old am I? Yeah, 20,
25
25.
years ago or so?
Yeah, a little
Yeah.
longer than that.
Yeah, maybe 30.
Mm.
Yeah. So I don't remember
Actually,
it.
oh my gosh, what am I saying? It was like 32 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Eek.
Yeah. I don't
Eek.
remember it, Hope, but I feel
I
like I've
just
learned
dated
something about
myself.
you because I had no idea that you actually were interested in doing
Well,
that.
it's
So
so funny because I was interested in it, but then I did talk to a few folks in the field, primarily women, and they absolutely dissuaded me from
Mm.
going into that career. At the time, things could be different today. I don't know at all, but at the time it was very male dominated, and I was again I was dissuaded from kind of entering that field. So
do you think you would have liked it?
I don't know. I really truly don't know. I was interested in it, and then the advice that I was given was that you just you have to be ready for a different kind of work environment. And so I was really young at the time, and just I think chose to not pursue that and do something different. But talking, going back to economics, like import export, right? I mean,
Oh,
that would
yeah.
be 100% straight in the path of having an economics degree behind me. But I was living by myself, needed to find a job quickly. I didn't have a ton of money, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, this specific firm is hiring." I ended up getting a job in sales, um, and not because I was looking for a job in sales, but because uh, it was a job that presented itself to me. And I have to say, I have been very fortunate because for the last 30 years, I have followed a career path in sales. But
Yeah.
from the perspective of what I graduated college with, a degree in, and how that translated to my first job, I would say not really at all. What about you, Heather?
Well,
That was very, very serious.
Yes,
thanks for the introduction.
you're welcome.
Um,
And for
and I
anybody
will
in
say,
our,
even
sorry,
after,
Heather, I don't mean to interrupt, but for anybody in our listening community, the reason my microphone is so close to my mouth is because I'm having a very bad microphone day. My
some technical
microphone's
issues today.
technical issues. My microphone is not working too well.
Not a
So
bad hair day, but a bad mic day.
That's right.
exactly.
And
That's funny.
Hopi, thank you for that, sort of description, because even after 55 years, I feel like I learn something new about you guys every day. So, I think for me, funny enough, I started out at Boston College as a liberal arts major, and I ended up taking a business economics class, and I really determined that I liked it a lot. And the liberal arts school didn't have a lot of business classes, so I decided that I would apply to the business school, and lo and behold, I did. And when I was in business school, I completed a double major in finance. And finance, for our listeners, is just really the study of money, or really how money flows through the economy. And caveat, I do not have an Investopedia description,
I was just going
unfortunately.
to ask, Heather. I
No,
was
I
just
do
going to
not.
ask what the Investopedia definition was.
Our listeners are going to have to look that one up.
Okay.
And so
You did a fine job describing it, Heather.
thank you, Hyde, thank you. And then I
In
also
case you
did
needed that acknowledgement, Heather.
I also did a double major in human resource management, and that is really, again, no Investopedia description here. It's the study of people and really how companies think about their employees, how they attract them, how they develop them, how they retain them. And my majors were actually a really good combination for me because I really liked numbers, and I really liked thinking around people, or at least organizational thinking around people. But to be clear, I initially picked finance because I think it was our brother Vincent, maybe, who said to me at the time, you should really think about a career in finance because there are not many women in finance, right? I mean, I think
I
that's,
guess we'll talk about later on whether or not that was good advice or not.
oh my gosh, I think it's hilarious because I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, sounds great. I'll definitely major in finance. I
Sounds
should
good
have
to me.
I should have thought about it a little bit
Sounds
more,
good to
because
me.
those
Exactly.
words were those words were so true. Um, but so I will say that during college, and actually the summers during college, I worked at a real estate investment management firm in downtown Boston. And again, for our listeners, the firm invested, really large amounts of money from institutional investors. So think about like company retirement plans. They have to invest your money so that when you retire, they can give it to you. And then, endowments like college endowments again. And we invested that money into big real estate projects, obviously hoping to make a return on your money or a return on your investment. And funny enough, there, our older sister Pam was a portfolio manager at the company at that time. And I actually got my part time job and summer internships because of her, really. But it is ultimately, my work there translated into my first real job, because upon graduation, I was offered a full-time position as a financial analyst, and I ended up staying at that firm for about 7 years, working as a financial analyst and then as an associate investment manager. So
Heather,
what I studied in college definitely translated into my first job.
Heather, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah, please.
Just because I heard you mention the summer internships.
You guys were there too.
Yes.
Do you remember?
Shout out to Pam. Pam, thanks for helping us get a job during the summer.
And
she got all three of us a job there.
Yeah, she got us all a job. So I was just laughing. I had to kind of stop myself because when you said summer internships, I almost started laughing because the three of us had so much fun commuting into Boston and
every day.
Getting out of Boston in time to get to Dance Energy. So.
Absolutely.
We've talked about Dance Energy.
Prioritizing things in life. So important.
How obsessed we were with that.
We made sure we all were leaving at the exact same time to get to the earliest class we could.
Exactly.
So funny.
Anyway, I'm sorry. I did not mean to
do you remember
interrupt
the summer internship?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I remember the summer internship and remember Hope and I like looking through, I don't know,
stacks
of
we were organizing files,
pictures and slides of different properties that the company was managing. And yeah, it's like, we were probably some of the first to try to make our way through those important pictures and slides.
Definitely. I mean, I think about it because the company was really, the company was really just starting, honestly. And I think I was the first financial analyst hired in the portfolio management department when I graduated. So
it's so
that's
funny.
So funny.
It was so many years ago. It was, summer internships before getting a summer internship was the thing these days, right?
Oh my gosh. We could do a whole
people are like
podcast on
freaking
that.
out about,
oh my gosh.
out about, first year out of college, second year out of college, just making sure they have the right summer internship.
It's insane. It's insanity. But we can talk about
anyway,
that
I'm sorry. I did not mean to.
So Hyde,
it's my turn.
Tell us about you and your major and your first job.
I graduated college with, guess what? A BA in economics.
So we don't need the Investopedia definition from you.
Hope did a fantastic, phenomenal job helping our listeners understand what economics and the study of economics is. So thank you, Hope, and thank you, Investopedia.
Hey. Hope.
All right.
Investopedia is not even a sponsor of our podcast, by the way. Okay. We've mentioned it like 10 times.
Exactly.
But yes, so I graduated college with a BA in economics, but honestly was just never really drawn to the financial sector. And honestly, I will say I didn't have a clearly defined career path. The only reason I majored in economics, I think, was because of what I was exposed to being around some of our older siblings. I know you guys are laughing really hard. To our listening community.
I'm laughing. I'm laughing at myself. When you said you were drawn to economics or business, I was thinking to myself personally, I'm not sure I was ever truly drawn.
Yeah. Well, what's so hard for our listening community is we're doing this podcast in 3 different locations. And so when we're speaking, we're watching one another on the video screen. It's sometimes hard not to laugh because we're noticing different things we're doing with our faces. And it looks like one of us is going to start laughing, which then, it's like a domino effect. It makes us
laughing or choking.
Are you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I swallowed water the wrong way.
Oh gosh, that's terrible. Okay. Well, I hope you're okay. Anyway, so yeah, I think the only reason I majored in economics was just because I was exposed to it being around some of our older siblings.
Yep.
Case in point, Heather, like Vincent saying that to you about you should be in finance, and Pam helping you get a job. So our siblings, some were in nursing, some were in education, some in science, some in business. But I think at the time that I was in college, it really was family feedback that encouraged business or economics degree for me. And I didn't do so good on my statistics class. I think like my freshman year, and so I think because of that, I didn't get accepted to the business school at UMass. So I stuck with economics. But how it translated into our first job, it didn't. Um,
But Heidi, it's funny that you
To be
say
clear.
it's funny that you say that though, because I think Heather said the same thing. I think a lot of people are influenced by family members
mhm.
when they start to think about what they're going to major in, as opposed to being like sometimes truly passionate about something.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of times people go into the career that they go into, or they study what they do in college because of just the influence in the family
And this is totally an
system.
aside too, and we've talked about this, but in terms of college, majors, I mean, I really feel like every freshman should go to college and be in an exploratory studies program for a year so they can really figure out, what interests them. But that's again a story for another podcast.
I know I was
Or
always
or
super
for the advice section at the end of the podcast, Ed. Wink, wink.
Yes,
yeah, but I was
all the
always
major
super
colleges are going to listen to my advice.
I was always super envious of, the kids that went to college and like were super passionate about something and just decided to study it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because that was not me. But
Yeah, it definitely wasn't me either. So yeah, like I said, my economics degree did not translate into a first job, but what did translate was the fact that I had a college degree. It didn't really
Yep.
matter that it was economics. So in my first job out of college, after the Peace Corps, I worked with a small for-profit organization that helped adults who were living with developmental disabilities transition to living on their own. Um, and yeah, so that is all I really have to say about my choice of major and it not translating to my first job. Um, so having,
so it
talked about,
sounds as though Heidi, you and I are the same in terms of, our college degree not really translating to our first jobs, where Heather's really did.
But I
yeah,
think, I think college degrees not translating to first jobs probably resonates with a lot of our listeners.
yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the little tidbits we talk about, I said, like, even though you choose a major, it doesn't mean you're going to end up getting a job related to the degree at all. And I think a lot of people find that to be true as they start, as doors start opening for them and along sort of the path of building a career. But okay, so what was the path that both of you guys took to building your careers?
Heather, why don't you start?
Sure. Thanks, Opie. So, I guess I would say, as I previously mentioned, I was at the real estate firm for 7 years. And I realized that I just didn't love the industry, to be honest. It was extremely male dominated. And honestly, most everyone that I was doing business with absolutely ate, slept, and breathed real estate. And I just looked in a mirror and I was like, that is not me. I do not eat, sleep, and breathe real estate. So I think, I started looking around for other opportunities outside of real estate that used my skills that I had, previously learned. And, I ended up accepting a role as a deal structuring analyst at a Japanese investment bank. And, that really just meant that we created financial solutions to help companies solve pretty complex financing needs. So like if somebody like American Airlines needed to buy, new airplanes,
Hmm.
but strategically they didn't want to own them or show them as assets on something called their balance sheet. It was that kind of, I guess you could say, somewhat financial engineering. And for me, I learned a lot there, but what my 2 years at the bank taught me was that I did not want to work as an investment banker because while the compensation was good, the hours and the quality of life were not. You could be working kind of all day, quasi busy until around 5 or 5:30, and then a portfolio manager would come over to you probably right when you're about to leave and say, hey, we just got this deal. We have to price it and we have to present it by 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, which means what?
You stay at work and you do it
Uh-huh.
until it's done.
Yeah,
Yep.
you stay at work until midnight or later until it's done. And
Sacrificing, yeah,
yeah,
time
it's
with
just
family or
when we talk about work-life balance, it was very challenging. Um, so I was at the investment bank for 2 years. And then, I really just thought that in order to really help advance my career further, I ended up going to business school and I went full time for 2 years. I got my master's degree in business and then I got my master's degree in finance as well.
You go, girl.
Yeah,
yeah,
you go,
girl.
girl. And then really, it was between my first and second year of business school that I had an opportunity to work on the equity sales desk of a large bank or brokerage firm in Boston. And again, that opportunity came up because a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, had a friend who worked on the desk, and she knew that they were looking for someone to sort of step in for a few months while one of the salespeople was on maternity leave. So it worked out great for me, and I ended up there that summer. And by the end of that summer, I was actually offered a full-time job upon graduation. And to be honest, I actually ended up doing some part-time work for them as well during my second year of business school. Um, so, long story short, I mean, I have now been at that same firm for 24 years. And in my role, think about it this way to our listening community, so I sell our stock or our equity platform. So, if you think about like stock research, stock ideas, when a company is moving from being a private company to becoming a public company, so that any one of us can own some of the shares in that company, that's an initial public offering of stock. And so when those happen, I go to my clients and I try to sell them those shares in those IPOs. Um, and the clients in that role are large mutual funds and hedge funds in and around Boston. So I think for me to kind of sum it up, I've worked in finance roles for 3 separate firms, and I have effectively survived working on Wall Street for about 30 years now. Um, so that is
Well,
my path to building my career. And Hopi, would you like to tell us your path?
you deserve applause for being
Yeah,
able to work on Wall Street
I'm
for
not sure
that
if it's
long,
applause or
Heather.
tears, but either way.
Applause or tears.
Yeah, sure. I can talk a little bit about what my path was to building my career. If if our listening community can stick with my intermittent coughing from the water that's
The
still
water
stuck in my
episode.
throat, the
Yeah,
water
no, I feel
episode.
terrible for you.
So I think the consistent theme for me throughout my career has been sales. So I mentioned I started in a sales role right out of college. Um, and I was working, that first job was in an employer services organization. So think, outsourced payroll services, outsourced benefits administration. It was a large employer services organization and it gave me excellent sales training. So after I left there, I continued my path in sales and worked for an asset management firm in San Francisco. An asset management firm is, Heather alluded to earlier, you were talking about institutional investors when you worked
Hmm.
in, I think, your second job out of
Yep.
college. An asset management firm is just an organization that will take your money and invest it for you. And so, like Heidi, Heather, and I are retail investors. There are big institutions, again, that Heather referred to, like a corporate pension plan, like a public pension plan, like an endowment, like a foundation, that also need their money to be managed. And they ask large institutional investment managers to manage those assets for them. I did that for 6 years, and then I had an opportunity to leave that company and go to work to help to help the man that became my husband, Jim, to help Jim start a company that was called Investor Force. And Investor Force was a software company. We developed investment reporting software to help pension funds, endowments, foundations, those large institutional investors, to help them understand how their money was invested. And we worked with the folks that helped advise those different clients, which were organizations called institutional investment consultants. And that has really been the bulk of my career. I spent 20 years doing that. Investor Force ultimately was sold to a much larger financial data and analytics company. We were part of that organization for 6 years. That company later divested the business to a private equity firm.
Mhm.
That private equity firm merged Investor Force, which with what was our largest competitor at the time. I stayed for about 6 months, and then I started my own consulting practice where I've been able to help small kind of organizations, financial technology organizations, grow and scale their sales processes. And so I'm going to pass the baton to you, Heidi, because I'm continuing to choke.
I know. Gosh, I really hate that you're having such a hard time. Yeah, well, thanks. I think both you guys do such a good job describing um, what you've done, and I feel like I'm a student sitting in a classroom being taught. So, bravo. Um, yeah, my path is a lot different than both of yours. I think I've mentioned I was a Peace Corps volunteer. So right after college, I went to Bolivia, and when I came back to the States, I needed a job, but I also knew that I was moving in less than a year out of the state to North Carolina because I was getting married. Um, so what I knew was I had a heart for people, and I knew I could only commit to working for 6 to 7 months. So I found a job working with adults living with developmental disabilities. And then I did that for a while. In North Carolina, it was the same type of issue for me. My husband was in his second year of graduate school when we moved there. So at least when I moved there, he'd been there for a year prior. Um, so I knew I'd be where we were temporarily. So, you come up against that question like, what do I do for a short period of time? Because you don't know if you're going to get a job, in the same place where he's finishing his graduate degree, or he's going to get a job working obviously someplace else, could be anywhere in the country really. So I got a job working for, it was a weight management company as a behavior modification specialist. And I think for me, it felt like I was working to get a job, not really finding a job to build a career due to the
Yep.
partnership that I had with Todd. And I had to stay open to where he got a job once he finished his graduate program. So, not too long after he finished, we moved to another part of North Carolina, had to find another job. And I did, something that I'd never done before. I was really into fitness at the time. So, I became a personal trainer at an athletic facility. And I did that for a while as I tried to kind of figure out what I ultimately really wanted to do. Because again, economics really wasn't in college the thing I should have chosen, but I did it because I was exposed to it. So after college, I'm like, I know I have a heart for people, but I'm not really sure how to translate that into a career where I feel like, I'm going to feel really satisfied and gratified in what I'm doing. And I think at that time, actually, I was toying with going to medical school. I'd taken a lot of the prerequisite classes because we lived in Chapel Hill. So I was, taking classes at UNC. Um, but I actually got talked out of that. Sort of,
Really?
yeah, like the demand of medical school and starting a family and the whole idea about like, can you have both, right? So it's kind of led to believe I would have to sacrifice my family too often. And so, like, knowing ultimately that wasn't what I would be okay with, I choose not to pursue that course of action. So, you know,
I
I,
didn't know that either, Heidi. That's
yeah,
something I definitely didn't remember.
Yep. Learn something new every day.
yeah.
Yep.
And, that whole idea about don't listen to others, listen from within, because
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like I could have absolutely done both. But at the time, for whatever reason, I, I, I made a different choice. But yeah, so at that time, I was volunteering for a nonprofit organization and I eventually got hired there. My husband and I moved to New Jersey and actually worked together at this organization for 8 years. So, kind of similar to Hope's story in terms of working with her husband.
Yep.
And during that period of time, we had two kids. So I worked typically around them versus working them around my work schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And after 8 years in New Jersey, we moved to Florida. I was a full time stay at home mom then, and I did that for about 5 years. And so when I started back
Kudos
to
to you
work,
for doing that. That's that's it's a
thanks.
amazing thing to be able to do, and such hard work.
Yep,
Yeah, and
hardest job in the world.
fortunate enough, right? Like to be able to afford to
Absolutely.
stay home because I know a lot of people who might be listening to this podcast can't. So, yeah, when I started back to work, it was part-time. And again, it reflected me being available to be able to pick up my kids from school and be at home with them when they got home. And so, like, if you look at what I've done for work, the common theme is people. I've helped different populations of people in one way or another and or have cared for my kids, right? Another little population. So eventually as the kids got older, I decided social work was the perfect fit for me. And so I went back to school to get an MSW. And I was in my late 30s at the time, so
Which is
it's never too
amazing
late,
too.
right?
Kudos.
So since then I've worked in
Absolutely
various
amazing.
various positions in mental health, primarily as a therapist in those mental health settings, and have owned my own psychotherapy practice in the town I live in for about 8 years. So that is sort of a history of, you know, my my path to a career because I would consider that my career, so is social work. And really, although I wasn't technically a social worker working in a lot of these nonprofit organizations, I was doing social work, if you will.
Yes, makes
Um,
sense.
Absolutely. And all the experience was forging your path to your practice.
yep. Yes. Yeah, I know. I
The
mean,
choices we make along the way.
yeah, I think so. So, guys, what have been the highlights of your career to date? Like when you think back on, how long you've been doing what you've been doing and the various things that you've been doing, like what have been some of the highlights, would you say?
Hubby, why don't you take it?
Yeah, I would start by saying I think the greatest highlight of my career has been building a product that had value that people bought,
Mm,
um, as well as building a business with what felt like a group of people who were like a family
hmm
and working side by side with my husband every day. For 16 years, we worked together side by side. It was just an incredible experience. I was so fortunate and I'm so grateful to have experienced that. Um, and so, I would also say not only building a product that had value for clients, it was a software platform that also had value to another company and that it was sold. And I think I would say, as much as I had so much pride in that, it was also heartbreaking
I was just going
when
to ask you that
it
question.
was really heartbreaking when the company was sold and
Hmm
then was divested and merged with our largest competitor in the space.
Yeah.
There's I to this day, I mean, I think that all happened. We were sold in 2013 and then divested by that larger company in 2018,
mm
and to this day, I mean, what is it? Almost 6 years later, I still, in a way, grieve that kind of family feel and culture.
The culture. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you guys have you and Jim built an amazing culture there.
yeah. So, yeah, that's the highlight of my career. Heather, I'll again pass the baton over to you.
I mean, that's such a great question. And I mean, I guess I'll approach it in terms of like highlights, but also what's brought me sort of happiness, sort of why I've stayed. And, I guess I would start by saying that, I'm proud that I've been able to survive on Wall Street for as long as I have, and that my career has really provided me with, a real wealth of knowledge about a lot of different industries that I would otherwise really know nothing about.
hmm
And I think also the opportunity to help support my family as well. And I think
Heath, can
for,
I ask you a question real quick?
yeah,
When you
please.
say, proud of having been able to survive Wall Street, do you mean as a woman or do you mean that just the culture of Wall Street?
Both. I mean, as a woman and the culture on Wall Street, which is historically not welcomed a lot of women. Um,
Okay.
and when we talk about sort of biggest challenges, I can reference that a little bit more there
hmm
too. But I think, for me, if I think about what's brought me the most joy and why I stayed, it's really the learning. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I'd say about 12 years ago, I was given the opportunity to build and develop, a middle markets equity business, which is really focusing on some of the smaller asset management firms.
I remember
Um,
that, Heather.
yeah,
I
some of the
remember that.
smaller asset
Yeah.
management firms in Boston instead of the big ones that I had previously been my clients. Um, and that opportunity came with a big learning curve, and I learned a lot about the business and a lot about myself in that process. And the other part of the learning is just that my job entails a ridiculous amount of reading every day, whether it's financial news or industry deep dive reports or stock research reports. Um, and then the other part of it too is that I get to meet, major company chief executive officers and chief financial officers, and really smart investors several times a week. And in fact, I think over the years when I've, sort of looked in the mirror and I'm like, I'm so frustrated, I'll tell myself, well, all right, at least I learned something new today, because I'm serious. I learned something new every single day. Um, and then the other part of it too is, I guess I should mention
Who
that I've
doesn't
had,
love that?
yeah, no, I mean, but, and that's, and
That's right.
it's like, I think if you're going to be
Spice
in,
of life, Heather. Come on.
yeah, but it's, and it keeps you young
Learning for
too,
life.
right? It keeps your brain active, especially as you age.
Lifelong learner, Ed, lifelong learner.
Lifelong learner. So I also too should just mention that I've had the opportunity to create, women's networks, and
Mm,
mentor a lot of young women over the years, and that's brought me a lot of joy as well. So
that's great.
Hyde, what has been your highlight and what has brought you joy? And I know you do have a big heart.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the highlights was when my husband Todd and I were working together. It's similar to what Hope said in that
Yeah,
when we weren't working together anymore, it's just such a weird um, transition and hard to kind of adapt and adjust to. But so that was one of the highlights when I was working at the nonprofit, the international nonprofit. But the highlight of my career as a mom, of course, has been my kids. They are the delights of my heart, as I know you guys would say both about yours. And I am so proud of the people that they have become. Being a stay-at-home mom really just has filled my heart with like abounding joy. As a therapist, the highlight really is the offer of invitation into the hearts, the souls, and the minds of my clients. It's really such an incredible honor to sit with people and be a part of their healing
amazing.
process. Um, and I think also when I failed to mention that I taught as an adjunct instructor at a local university for 4 years. And I think that really, I love teaching. It really brought me great joy to see students learn and grow and develop personally and professionally. Um, I just loved it. So yeah, I did adjuncting at the College of Social Work for 4 years.
Again, it follows that what you just described follows your theme of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Having the opportunity just to,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
love that. I mean, it's so
care about
special.
people.
I love that.
Thanks. Yeah. It's been very meaningful to me. So, well, now that we talked about highlights, the challenges, da, da, da.
Heather, you
Da
want to
da
go
da
first or you want
da
me to?
Yeah. Heath, why don't you take this one first?
da da da.
What's been the biggest challenge for you as you've been
Oh
building your
my
career?
goodness. Well, I could do an entire podcast really on what has been challenging for me, but I think over the years,
Would it have some
it's
expletives in it, Heath?
yeah, probably all too many expletives to be quite honest. But I think for me, over the years, I mean, if I look back, my goodness, I dealt with, harassment, from clients, and I've had managers who were completely and utterly tone deaf to my needs and the needs of my colleagues.
Mm,
I've dealt with gender pay disparities. But I think for me, the biggest challenge, honestly, has been navigating the political culture at the firm, which again, historically, has not included a lot of women, and in my experience, has been quite culturally biased towards women. And I say that about the firm, but I really feel like it's the majority of kind of large banks and brokers. I know it's a big statement, but it's again based on my experience.
mhm,
Um, so I think for me, as a result, I've personally felt a lot of sort of realized bias and a lot of unconscious bias. which has made work-life balance difficult at times. And I also think too, for me, being in a regional office for a large bank has also been it's a blessing, but it's also a curse. And I mean that because while I'm away from really the political power center, in New York, that's kind of the blessing. But it's also a curse because, that political power center helps to get you, kind of paid and promoted. So it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind can be good, but it can also be bad, is what I would say in terms of the challenges. So Hopi, I don't know if you want to talk about some of your challenges. Maybe
Well,
some of them are the same.
so it sounds like, and when you talk about the challenges, it's been like a kind of go to the mattresses kind of experience.
Oh, it is a go to the mattresses kind of experience. And yeah, I mean,
And
Which just means
it's not personal. It's business. I mean,
exactly.
the business of Wall Street is business.
Business.
It doesn't care about you.
mm,
Everybody's replaceable. We all have to remember that.
And that's
yeah,
probably not just true of Wall Street. That's
No,
probably
it's pretty much corporate culture, I think.
yeah, I think so. I think so.
Unless you're in a very special corporate culture.
like Investor Force.
I was lucky. I
Exactly.
was definitely lucky. Yeah. So I mean, when I think about challenges, I would really say, I mean, I was, and I do feel really lucky, and sort of followed my gut instinct along the way through my career path, which gave me excellent sales training and put me into a situation where I could use those skills to help build a business from scratch. I would also say that I was pretty lucky with managers along the way. I did have some challenges. So, like, way back in the day, at the start of my career, I had some inappropriate things that were said to me. I think at the time I thought while it was inappropriate, I also think it was kind of like what women had to deal with at the time. I
Yeah,
know that
And
stuff is like,
continue to.
and continue, but I mean, I know that stuff is much less tolerated today.
it is.
Right,
And
it
they're
is.
I mean, they're trying to
Things
do
have
and be better.
changed.
Corporations are trying to do and be better. Diversity,
They are
equity, and
trying to
inclusion.
do and be better for sure. So I also, over the course of my career, did have one manager that was, I guess the word I would use would be, he was just deceptive. I
Mm.
won't really elaborate, but he didn't last very long in his role, so that was good.
Mm.
I remember having conversations with you about that over the years.
Yes, and then I will say, I've only ever had one female manager in the course of my career.
Mm.
And the one thing I noticed about that was that she tried so hard to be like one of the guys
Yeah.
that she actually said some pretty inappropriate things to fit in.
Mm.
And I was really, really turned off by that because I don't think that any woman should have to try to be one of the guys.
The exact opposite, right?
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to say inappropriate things about women to fit in with a group of non-women.
We'll do another podcast on
Yeah,
insecurity at some point in time,
I
which is
think
what that behavior is generated from anyway.
It's the imposter syndrome too. She probably felt like
fake it till you make it.
fake it till you make it, kind of. Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I would say that I've seen and still see for whatever reason, I tend to feel like women can be hard on other women. I'm not really sure why. Sometimes I think about it, it could go, all the way back to our roots and sort of survival of the fittest type mentality. But whatever it is, I would say that when I see that, it's always pretty tough, which will lead to at some point here in the next few minutes, advice about women supporting other women.
Yeah.
What about you, Heidi?
Challenges. Yeah. Well, for me, I think, initially it was the start and the stop of things. 1 year here, 1 year there, because we were just moving a lot.
Yeah.
And then I
I
think
can imagine that would
generally,
have been tough.
yeah, and I think there's generally working around my husband's career,
Yeah.
and my desire to be with my kids, of course, right? I mean, I was always trying to figure out how to put them first, but yeah, and I think that's true for a lot of people who both work. I think just the sacrifices that are required by both people in the relationship to figure out how to, manage being okay with moving for a partner's job, even if it means you're going to have to find a new one, or, there's just a lot of things that come up in that space. So, anyway, as I got older, the kids got older, I had the time to put myself first a little bit, if you will. So, um, but I think I want to mention just a challenge with being stay-at-home mom, um, because so many women work outside the home these days. Sometimes when you say you're a stay-at-home mom, when people say, "Oh, what do you do?" It can feel like, "Oh, wow, great. You're a stay-at-home mom?" Kind of like
Oh,
the
that's
sort of,
so nice.
yeah, like good for you with a little like pat on the back, or imagine pat on the
Yeah,
back.
shame, shame.
It's sort of the idea like that's all you do.
Right.
And what I want to say is like, no, like you working outside the home is that all you do? You know? Um,
Yeah.
so
Oh,
I
yeah.
just think because it's just it is hard. It's hard to be home. And so the challenge can be in that if you let that impact and affect how you feel about your choice to stay home, gosh, like is this all I do? Am I just a stay-at-home mom? So I think some women can feel shame about it. And I know that's something we'll talk about when we do like work-life balance stuff, but I just wanted to mention that as um, something that has come up for me, and sort of coming back to, no, like this is the greatest job in the world. It's the hardest job in the world, but it's the greatest job in the world. So
I mean,
anyway,
I don't mean to
Yeah.
interrupt, Hyde, too, but it's like, I mean, think about, how ironic that is, right? That it's like, oh, good for you when you're molding the minds of little kids. It's like the most important thing
right.
in the world.
Well, it's so funny too because like if work at home wasn't so hard, maybe more men would be doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh my gosh,
Um, and of course,
we
you
do.
know, yeah, it's gender role socialization, but still, anyway, um, what kinds of, advice, guys, do you feel like you'd like to offer anyone listening to this podcast about their career, regardless of what stage of their career they're in? What would you want to say? Um,
Have
maybe
Heather, you
you
want me
want
to
to?
start first or do you want to
Yeah,
start
Hope you're up.
first?
Go for
Okay.
it.
Okay.
Definitely.
So I actually have several pieces of advice, regardless of where anyone in our listening community is in their careers. Um, First and foremost, do something that you love. Do something that you're passionate about. Do not listen to other people tell you what you should do. I think Heather, Heidi, and I gave examples on this podcast about things that we were sort of pushed into because other people thought it might be a good idea for us.
Mm-hmm.
Try to listen to your gut and find something that you absolutely love. The reason I say that is that you bring work into all other aspects of
Mhm.
your life subconsciously. And so if you're in a job that you absolutely like dislike, um, you know, find something different. The world is big.
That's so
Um,
true, Hope, because it's hard to shut off.
To
it's hard to
You
shut
separate
know,
the
off.
two,
It's
yeah.
so hard to separate.
leave
Yeah.
work at work, and you're home. You're home. Yeah.
Yep.
And if you're unhappy at work, you just bring you carry that with you.
Mhm.
And it just impacts other aspects of your life. And that's unfair, right? When
Totally.
you're not at work, you should not be thinking about work. I would say if you're considering, going into a certain field or you're considering taking a certain job, talk to people who are either in that field or in that job. Ask them what it's
Mm.
like. Make sure or ask what a day in the life looks like. Do they enjoy what they do? And kind of really hammer on the why,
Huh.
and
That's good.
see if what they say appeals to you. Because that should give you some idea of whether you might like it or not. But kind of talking to folks that are sort of already doing something that you might be interested is just a good sounding board.
And can I just say one thing too?
Yeah,
When
please.
you ask about like the day in the life, like a
Yeah,
true day in the life.
a true day in the life.
What time do you
Truly.
get up? Is there commuting time? What you do? Do you have to bring work home?
Yeah, all of that stuff. Because you want as real a picture as possible.
That's right.
To anybody in our listening community right now, the number one really big thing for me. Don't tolerate bad behavior. If you see something, if you hear something, say something. Don't let a toxic culture be created or carried forth. Heather, I think the word you've used, over time is be a culture carrier.
Absolutely. If you can be a culture carrier.
Each individual person has the ability to, in some way, shape, or form, impact change. So again, if you see something, hear something, say something about it.
And don't be afraid of retaliation too, because this is it. Like in today's society, companies don't tolerate bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
So there should be no retaliation. You should have no fear. There are all sorts of, you can go to human resources, etc. So it's a great point, Hope.
Yeah. And I guess I would also say try to find your voice early in your career. Try to make sure that you're speaking up when it's appropriate. Make sure you're asking, for work if you don't have enough. Kind of like make sure that you're being heard. It demonstrates leadership. If anybody is listening and you're bored in your job, ask your manager for more work. There's always more work to do. So show initiative. Don't just sit back and be bored. On the other hand, if you have way too much work, you need to talk to your manager and try to figure out how to offload some of that work. Don't be taken advantage of. That's the other side of the board equation. And then, I think most importantly is that couple of things. If you do something that you're passionate about, it won't feel like work. So, you gotta represent your brand. You have to be your brand. And then the other thing I would say is be the CEO of your life. This is your life. No one's going to make your life happen. No one is going to live your life. Work is a significant part of, the majority of adults' daily lives. And, you have to be the one that's sort of guiding that. That is what I would say. Heather, over to you.
That's great. That's great stuff, Hope. It's really great stuff.
Just like Hyde said, that is great stuff. And it goes back to being the CEO of your life and what we said, kind of up front.
And I don't sound like RFK Jr. anymore.
Right. Well, and to our listening communities too, it's like asking that question, right? Do you live to work, which we tend to do early in our careers, or are you working to make a living, right? And you want to make sure that, because it requires so much of your time, that you're doing something that you enjoy doing. And so, Hope, I love the advice. And, what I'm going to say is, and I love Heidi's question to us, and I am going to approach it, the question for listeners who are on Wall Street or who are considering a career on Wall Street, because again, I want
it's reflective of your experience.
Yeah, it's reflective of my experience. And it goes to Hyde's comment about go to the mattresses, right? Because Wall Street is not personal. It's business. And again, it doesn't care about you, right? It carries this sort of sordid reputation for cutthroat capitalism where few women are allowed, even though, again, it's really trying to do better and be better. But for me, it's something that I did not consider, much less understand when I was young. I saw an opportunity and I was offered a seat at the table. And I took the seat really despite the fact that the table was missing several legs, if you get that point. So I think for me, the advice that I would offer listeners, considering a career on Wall Street, again, and this is really important, right? It's really understand that you're walking into a very competitive culture.
Like
everybody
competitive,
like everybody's fighting for a share of a profit pool, right? And every business wants the biggest slice of that profit pool.
A lot of scarcity mentality.
Yeah. And while you're supposed to work in a team, my experience has been that, sort of my direct colleagues have been teammates, but a lot of people around us are not. So you just have to be aware of that culture. And then I think the other thing
and
too
think
is
hard about it before you jump into it, is what you're saying,
really
right?
hard on it and try to understand it, because you don't really understand it, I think, until you're living it. And then, so just consider it if you're considering a career. And then, sort of be aware of the political power dynamics in which you're working. And every company, regardless of what industry it is, has a political power dynamic. I would say, be deliberate and advocate for yourself.
Yeah,
I
that's a
think,
good one, Hev.
don't just sit back and rely on your talents to get you recognized, because they will not. You have to self promote, right? Self advocacy is really important, and it can be hard to do, but to Hope's earlier point, it demonstrates leadership. And the last piece of advice from me is about
And Heather,
networks.
I'm sorry.
No, please.
Just on the point about self promotion, it would
Yeah.
seem as though women might have a harder time self promoting than men.
Yeah, and I think because a lot of women think it's self-serving, right? And a lot of women don't want to be self-serving, but you have to be. Um, and the biggest point for me, and it's really one of the most important points, is just about building networks, right? It's really incredibly important, no matter what industry you're in,
Yep.
to build networks and use those networks. There's a lot of research about men building networks and using them very well, and women build networks too, but they never really use them. And so
That's
you got to
interesting.
use them um, to build alliances, right? And those alliances connect you.
Are you on Survivor? Did you
I
get your
haven't been on
lines?
I haven't been on Survivor yet, but
Just
there's
kidding.
always an opportunity. Maybe that's what all three of us should do.
And it probably
Ooh,
feels like you're on Survivor in Wall Street
Maybe
culture.
we should be on
True.
Survivor. That might
That's
be
good.
as a team. We could team up. But that's so funny because alliances connect you to mentors, and those are people who teach you what you need to know. And more importantly, sponsors, right? Those are the people who can promote you, and those are the people who are talking about you when you're not in the room, right? And they're really important. And I think it took me years to learn to do both strategically, because again, it goes to what Hope was saying. I kind of always thought that using networks was self-serving. However, what I now understand is that building networks it's not self-serving. It's really that practice
Necessary.
It's necessary. And I think the practice of seeking out powerful people, really cultivating favors, and again, cashing in or asking favors, is itself
Asking someone to be your mentor.
it is. I mean, asking somebody to be your mentor and or your sponsor, because that in and of itself is a demonstration of leadership potential, I think. And I think it's something that's really pretty necessary if you're considering, again, a career where, you know, you need to effectively connect yourself to powerful people.
Mm.
That's what I
Awesome.
would say.
Okay.
And Hyde, over to you.
Great advice from both of you guys. I love everything that you had to say. I want to capitalize on that term that Hope used, the CEO of your life.
I love it.
And as she was talking about it, I kept thinking, so what can be some of the difficult things for people to actually own their own power that way is, maybe a lack of confidence or fear in trying to ask somebody to be a mentor or trying to ask somebody to be a sponsor. And so, if that's true for anybody listening on this podcast, perhaps, they could consider going to therapy to get some help to be able to be more of a self advocate or work on what it is that keeps them feeling underconfident and, almost like kind of helpless, powerless to make changes in their work environments.
It's a good thought,
Um,
Hyde.
the other thing, and even too, like boundaries, like what you were talking about, Hope, with that separation of work and life, like leave work at work and when you're home, you're home. If that's even a challenge for people too, like maybe therapy could be helpful that way. But the other thing I was going to say for me in regard to kind of the way that Todd and I, my husband and I, have made decisions about his career, my career. We've just prayed a lot. We really
Mhm.
prayed often about whether these were the right choices for us. or not. And if things weren't going well, sort of praying about, should we stay? Should we go? What should we do? And so I just offer that to anybody who might feel like that could be an important thing for them to do or an important part of their life. Then I would just say, it's never too early to build a career and it's never too late.
Love that.
So true.
What I mean by that is, I went back to grad school when I was like in my late 30s. And so, yeah, I mean, if you feel like you have this desire to do something to change careers, at midlife, don't feel like you can't. Don't listen to others if it goes against your own intuitive knowing. So, what I mean by that is that comment I made about thinking about med school back in the day.
Yeah.
I really let myself be talked out of something that probably I would have really enjoyed and would have been able to figure out how to find a balance
And would have been excellent at.
between
Oh my
those two
gosh,
things.
excellent.
You guys are so sweet. Thanks. And then I would say, you have to feel good about the choices that you make because you're the only one making them. So have a clear conscience about them. And sometimes that might mean putting a career on hold or starting a career a little bit later on, like I did. And then last thing I just would like to say is try to be content with the choices that you make. And if you're not content with the choices you make, you can always make a different choice. So
Really sound advice, Hyde. That was
Excellent
great.
advice,
Really,
ladies.
really great.
well, do you guys
I'm so proud to know you.
you want to add anything before we end the podcast? I mean, I feel like I learned so much from you guys, just remembering your careers. Because again, I know we've had conversations over the years about our careers, but it just gets hard to contain all the information over so many years. So I feel like I revisited a lot of stuff that I knew about you, but now I feel like I now am remembering and know. So
It brings back funny conversations and not funny conversations, just about different decisions that we've all made over the course of our lives.
yeah.
So
and
yeah.
and hopefully our listeners have heard and picked up some great career path tidbits as well.
And they've also learned that Hope needs a new microphone.
A new microphone and not to have a mouth filled with water when I start laughing, because that is what caused me to choke.
And we're hopeful that at the next podcast, this might be different for you. So that's exciting.
Thank you. Me too.
And we do hope that our listeners laugh a lot too. Laugh along with us.
Please.
Yes.
So, having said that, Heath, you want to let people know how they can find us?
Absolutely. So thanks again to our listening community for joining us today. And remember, you can find us at Finding Our Way Through on all the podcast platforms. That's Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Please hit subscribe to follow us, like us, and help spread the word about the community that we're trying to build. And I would say until next week, remember, you are not alone, and you got this.
You got this.
You got this.